Well, the time is just gone, 6 minutes past 8 p.m. as we continue with Wednesday nights with myself, Wadi, and we are taking a look at part two of the discussion tonight. And what is extremely important and very, very relevant in the country is in 4 days' time, the United Democratic Front, the UDF, and I think many of us who grew up in the apartheid era in the 80s will recall the UDF and the UDF now, 40 years old, the 40th anniversary of the UDF and the role that the UDF had actually played at that point in time. And we are now going across to be joined by Prema Naidoo, who is a former member of the United Democratic Front. As we await Prema joining us on the screen, we've seen the UDF obviously which played a major role in the struggle against apartheid. And the 40th anniversary will be celebrated in Johannesburg this Sunday. I see Prema Naidoo is on screen. Mr. Naidoo, good evening to you, sir, and welcome to the show.
Good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes, sir. Now, obviously the UDF has got a huge history. In fact, for people like ourselves, we were still young in the 80s and we grew up during the 80s and looking at the UDF extremely relevant at that point in time when the pressure was being put on the apartheid government and the tide against the apartheid government was turning. Let's just go back to the formation, your memories. You recall the UDF, when it was formed, why it was formed, and just some background so that, we can understand. And I'm sure new generations who don't know what the UDF was all about, perhaps, they could just get some sort of an overview as to what the UDF was all about.
Okay, thank you. As you've indicated that the UDF was launched on the 20th of August, 1983, in Cape Town, in Mitchell's Plain. But before that, the earlier that thing, the apartheid government was trying to introduce a dummy body called the South African Indian Council. So we then had what we call an anti-South African Indian Council, and we campaigned to boycott that election. We had a conference early on in 1983, and at that conference, two decisions were taken. One decision was to revive the Transvaal Indian Congress, and the second decision was to form a united front to fight against apartheid. And the process started much earlier. There were many organizations that were opposed to the apartheid government. Church bodies, trade unions, cultural organizations, sporting organizations, etc., came together and they formed the United Democratic Front. And there were over 800 affiliates that came together to form the United Democratic Front. And basically, the United Democratic Front slogan was, "Apartheid divides, the UDF unites." And our aim was to unite the oppressed people of South Africa to fight the nationalist government.
Yes, and what we know about the UDF is initially, obviously, it was about people like yourselves. I know you mentioned reviving the Transvaal Indian Congress and also the Natal Indian Congress, but just for people, ordinary people, to register their disapproval of the apartheid government at that point in time. I think the tricameral parliament was very, very central to the organization that, when it started gaining momentum, because it was their opposition to the tricameral parliament at that point in time that obviously gave the organization a lot of impetus.
Yes, it did. There was a series of bills that the then apartheid government were pushing through. The tricameral parliament, they set up what they called urban Bantu councils throughout. And the aim of the UDF was to oppose these dummy organizations, because these organizations didn't have decision-making powers. They only had powers to make recommendations. And the nationalist government and the national parliament of the national government will decide whether to accept the recommenders. So a decision was taken was to boycott these institutions. Hence, the United Democratic Front played a leading role in organizing communities across the border to fight against these bills and to oppose the nationalist government as a whole.
Yes, and I still recall as a youngster and during the tricameral elections as well, and many of us obviously at that point in time very hot-blooded and in opposing the tricameral, the elections that had taken place. So it just jogged, many a memory for many of us who were still growing up at that point in time in the 80s, who had just basically finished school or were just getting out of school. So all of that. But what I found a very, very important is the non-racial character of the UDF at that point in time, because it actually was right across all colors, all people, and it wasn't a political party, but to build social cohesion for a single purpose. It played a major role, Prema.
Yes, as I indicated earlier on, you see, our slogan was apartheid divides, the UDF united. And non-racialism was the central theme in which we organized. There were organizations, as I've indicated, Transvaal and Natal Indian Congress. There was an organization called JODAC, which was made mainly by progressive white comrades in our organization. And there were many people. We drew people from all walks of life. And in the leadership, we had people like the Reverend Ellen Busak, Achi Gumede, Albertina Susulu, that really led this organization. Dr. Jasat, who was the president of the Transvaal Indian Congress, and Mewa Ramgovan, who was the president of the Natal Indian Congress, played a leading role in organizing and participating in the activities of the United Democratic Front.
Yes, and also I think when one looks at how it inspired future activists, and particularly in the struggle against apartheid, the UDF actually went a long way, Mr. Naidoo, in inspiring future generations.
In fact, the UDF was so successful, it was well beyond our imagination. We, I mean, formed the UDF, and we were amazed at the response of the UDF. People from throughout the country, the rural areas, all the provinces in South Africa. At that time, we had 4 provinces. There were strong UDF structures that were built in the organization. And truly, it was those people who made the apartheid government ungovernable.
Well, definitely. And also, I think apart from just making the apartheid government ungovernable, we had actually seen, just so much by way of youth activism that had taken place. And this is the reason why I think when we look at generations like our generations, we were politicized. And sometimes, we draw comparisons between the youth today, saying that the youth are not politicized to the extent that we were in those years. Now, obviously, we were up against an apartheid government. But again, when you look at some of the personalities you speak about the Reverend Ellen Busak, when you speak about people like Dr. Jasat and also many others right across the entire country, these were figureheads, but they were also committed, they were dedicated, and they gave a lot. In fact, they sacrificed a lot, for the movement, for the United Democratic Front, but also in terms of where we are today, enjoying a democratic or enjoying democracy in a free country.
Yes, 2 things. I mean, one is, as you mentioned, that we managed to mobilize young people throughout the country. In Soweto, you had the Soweto Youth Congress, at the Alexandra Youth Congress. And in Lenasia, we had the Lenasia Youth Congress. Ismail Wadi, a prominent activist from Lenasia, has just written a book on the young activist from Lenasia. So the youth played a central role. Many of the UDF leaders were charged for high treason. People like Albertina Susulu, Popo Molefe, Terra Lakota were charged for high treason. We were living in very, very repressive conditions. So, people had suffered a lot. People paid a high price for their involvement in the movement.
Yes. Now, just to reflect again, obviously the UDF at some point in time disbanded after we became a democracy. Uh, and there are many that actually question because, for the reasons that you speak about in terms of inspiring people in terms of the level of activism that existed at that point in time, but also this whole question surrounding social cohesion and the like, and many question the fact that was this a good decision? Was this a bad decision? Should the UDF have disbanded? Or because now we are seeing that there are calls for the at the 40th anniversary for an organization like the UDF to address many challenges we are faced in the country right now as we speak.
Yes, that's a very interesting question you're raising, is whether it was the right thing to disband the United Democratic Front. At the time, it was felt when the ANC was unbanned, Nelson Mandela was elected as the president of the African National Congress. People like Ahmed Kathrada were on the executive, and it was felt that the UDF should be disbanded, and a lot of his activists became leading members of the ANC. Many of them were elected to parliament. Mr. Kathrada was a member of Mandela's cabinet. So, was it a correct decision? In hindsight, I think it was an incorrect decision. It was a decision that we made, probably didn't think through at the time. We lost that, where we drew different people from different communities, different structures, the trade union working together. And it was possibly say, yes, maybe the incorrect decision.
Yes, in fact, I see that some of the stalwarts are obviously saying that this spirit of activism needs to be revived, and also looking at new challenges that we are faced with on a day-to-day basis. And again, the UDF could be the forum that could possibly, revive some of this, the social cohesion. Because the thing is, what we're seeing is, we, instead of social cohesion, we become a lot more divided as well at this point in time. So all of this, at the end of the day, you need an organization like the UDF with the spirit of the UDF, with the type of leadership that the UDF actually have, to basically embrace everybody, so that we can together overcome some of the critical challenges that this country is faced with right now.
Yes, I mean, if you see one of the slogans in the celebrating the 40th anniversary of the UDF is to say, to revive the spirit of the UDF. And as you know, that, I mean, corruption, inefficiency, nepotism has creeped into government, that has made our government unworkable. I mean, if you look at a great city like Johannesburg, it is collapsing. And what the UDF intends to do is to revive the spirit of honesty, integrity, non-racialism, that we need to begin to revive the spirit in our communities, so that we can serve the community, we can serve the poorest of the poor and make life to them much better. At the moment, the people who suffer the severe brunt of the corruption and the inefficiency is the poorest of the poor. And we need to begin to change that culture and put the country on a different trajectory.
Well, definitely, and I think when one looks at somebody like the Reverend Alan Bussack, and we know much has been said about his refusal to attend the 40th celebrations, and he makes a point that he does not want to be associated with an organization which he says is helping the ANC to continue abusing the rights and dignity of ordinary citizens. Now, this is just the feeling of the Reverend Alan Bussack, but also it sends a very, very strong message to the government that, listen, despite what the UDF has done despite all the sacrifices, despite the struggles of the UDF, to the extent that they provided the resources you needed even in Parliament by providing future leaders to represent us in Parliament. You have basically failed the country, and I suppose there are many people, including yourselves, that obviously are concerned, are hugely concerned at where this government has gone. And this is again, coming to the point that the Reverend Alan Busak has actually made. And clearly, there is some merit in his refusal and his sentiments regarding this issue.
Look, yes, I think it is unfortunate that Dr. Alan Busak has declined the invitation. Yes, some of his points are very relevant. I think, and his point, we need to talk about some of his criticism. And I would like to see Alan Busak being part of this discussion and raising his criticism. As you have also indicated, that a lot of his criticisms are valid. And we need to, but it's no point in just boycotting things and staying away. We are a country in crisis, and we need to look for ways and means of putting the country on track. I mean, shouting from the rooftops alone will not help. We need to have discussions. We need to talk. We need to raise our criticism openly.
Exactly. Now, just talking about the revival of the UDF, considering that many of the stalwarts, many of those that had basically started with the UDF are no longer around. We've got a new breed of activists in this country. In fact, we have many that have not even been through the apartheid era. In fact, when you're looking in the younger generation, the new generation as well. What would it take to actually revive an organization like the UDF and possibly even under new leadership and addressing different challenges?
Yes, I want to agree with you. I mean, we want young people to join the struggle in whatever form they see it. But I mean, there is a crisis in government. We are challenged by climate change, throughout the world, and it is the duty of young people to come forward. But one of the things I would advise young people is that yes, they must come forward. Yes, they must take part in changing our society for the better. But they must also understand the history of where we come from. If you don't understand the history of where we come from, it'll be very difficult for them to chart the way forward. They don't have to agree with everything that the generation before them did. Obviously, they're entitled to their criticism and all that, but they need to understand why certain decisions were taken at a particular time in our history.
Yes, I think what is important, what you're saying, obviously, is to revive and to focus on the future or on the new generation. But if you were to ask any young person today, Mr. Naidoo, uh, do you know about the UDF? What do you know about the UDF? And ask somebody at high school, at matric level, ask somebody at university, somebody that's even out of university. Because we've lived through an entire generation since 1994. 30 years, almost 30 years down the line, where we are in a democratic country. But if you ask many of these people within this age category, what do you know about the UDF? There's very little that many will be able to tell us.
Now, look, I think, I mean, you are right. The younger generation don't know the history of this country, the history of the struggles that was played for many, many decades. I mean, people like Mandela served 27 years in prison. And not many people know about the difficulties that the Mandela family went through. The failing there, I think, is, I would say, my generation, and probably your generation. We didn't carry the history through to our people. I mean, the Ahmed Katara Foundation is very strong in publicizing the history of our struggle. And that's quite important, and a lot more needs to be done to get people to understand where we come from.
Well, definitely. In fact, I think what you're saying is absolutely critical because when one just looks at the voters' role, for instance, And if I'm just looking at within our own communities, within our own Indian communities as well, how many young people have actually registered to vote? How many of them actually participate? How many of them go to the polls on election day? Very, very few.
Yes, it's absolutely shocking that from 1994, as we're going forward, less and less people are voting. And that is very, very troublesome. In a democracy, uh, we have our grievances and we have the opportunity to go to the polls and vote for people who we believe who can do a better job. Staying away, in my opinion, doesn't help. And we need to persuade young people in particular to come forward, to register as voters, and take part in the process of electing a leadership that can take this country forward.
Yes, and obviously it's also important to impress upon them that it is in their own interest because they are the future generation. They are going to be impacted, and considering where we are economically, where we are, with corruption and all the other challenges that we are faced with in this country, it is about them. It is about their future that is going to be severely impacted, Mr. Naidoo.
No, I can't agree with you more. I mean, the younger generation, they are the future. Uh, they are the custodians of this country, and they need to come forward to take part in the process of democracy, to make sure that democracy is alive. We have a wonderful constitution. Uh, we need to protect those ideals in the constitution, and we need to defend this democracy. Even if it means with our lives, we need to defend it.
Yes, and just finally, Mr. Naidu, the 40th commemoration celebrations that are taking place, what can be expected?
Well, look, I'm not privy to the program and or what's actually going to be happening, but basically, it's a celebration of 40 years since an organization was launched, and also the thing is about active citizenry, citizens taking part in their lives, taking part in politics, making decisions. And the UDF wants to put on the table the values, its values when it was formed, its values when it conducted struggles, so that the younger generation hopefully can take that forward and carry it through to the better future of this country.
Well, thank you very much for that, sir. And we do appreciate you taking time out this evening and being part of this discussion right here on Salam Media. We wish you all the best, and I'm sure we will follow developments comes the weekend. And also, as far as the celebration is concerned, I'm sure a lot will be said, and we definitely will follow developments there. But for now, we thank you. We do appreciate your time, and all the best to you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
Prema Naidoo, former member of the United Democratic Front, with us this evening as we speak about the UDF's 40th anniversary. And this brings us to the end of this evening's broadcast right here on Salam Media. We wish you all the best. And until we meet again, from myself and the team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.